The cold wind cut across the white landscape like a knife. Snow stretched in every direction as far as anyone could see. This was the Canadian Arctic, one of the coldest places on Earth. Today, it would become the testing ground for 7 different alien species. Kim Tae-ho pulled his thick coat tighter around his body. The human engineer stood next to a small building that served as the base camp. His breath came out in white clouds that disappeared quickly in the freezing air. He watched as strange ships landed one by one on the flat ice field. The first ship was made of what looked like crystal. It sparkled in the weak sunlight as it touched down. The second ship was round and silver, making odd humming sounds. More ships followed, each one different from the others. Tae-ho had never seen anything like them before. Lita Min stood beside him, holding a tablet computer. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her job was to watch and record everything that happened during the trial. She looked excited but also nervous. "I still cannot believe this is really happening," Damin said. "Aliens coming to Earth for a survival test." Tae-ho nodded. "The Council said they want to see which species can survive in extreme conditions. The winners get special protection and extra resources." The doors of the alien ships began to open. Strange creatures stepped out onto the ice. The first group looked like walking crystals. Their bodies were clear and reflected the light like diamonds. Their leader was tall and moved with smooth, flowing motions. "That must be Vexstar," Damin said, checking her notes. "He leads the team from Zephyr Prime. Their planet is mostly desert, very hot and dry." The crystal being approached the human observers. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Vexstar of the Zephyrian people. We are here for the extremist trial. This cold world will be easy for beings of our advanced nature." Tae-ho bowed politely. "Welcome to Earth. I am Kim Tae-ho. I will be participating in the trial as well." Vexstar looked surprised. His crystal body seemed to shine brighter for a moment. "You? But humans are such primitive creatures. Your technology is thousands of years behind ours. This trial is meant for advanced species." Before Tae-ho could answer, another alien approached. This creature was round and fat, covered in what looked like thick fur. It wore a helmet with tubes connecting to a backpack. When it spoke, the voice came through a machine. "I am Blorth of the Netherin Collective," the creature said. "We breathe methane gas, not your oxygen. Our suits will keep us alive in this frozen wasteland." More aliens came forward to introduce themselves. There was Caliph, who looked like a ball of glowing energy held together by a metal framework. Captain Yula was an insect-like creature with 6 arms and large compound eyes. Each species seemed confident that they would win easily. A human woman in a military uniform stepped forward. "Welcome, everyone. I am Captain Park Soo-jin. I will be monitoring weather conditions during the trial. Right now, the temperature is minus 20 degrees Celsius. It will get much colder tonight." The aliens did not seem worried by this news. Vexstar's crystal body sparkled. "Our people have survived in the vacuum of space. A little cold air is nothing to us." Blorth's machine voice laughed. "Our homeworld has storms that would freeze your blood instantly. This is like a warm summer day to us." Captain Yela clicked her mandibles together. "The extremist trial will prove which species deserves the highest status in the galaxy. Clearly, it will not be the humans." Dr. Huang, a human doctor, came forward with a large bag of medical equipment. "I will be monitoring everyone's health during the trial. If anyone gets in trouble, we can evacuate them quickly." The aliens looked insulted by this suggestion. Caliph's energy form pulsed brighter. "We will not need rescue. We are far beyond such primitive concerns." Captain Yula began explaining the rules. "Each team gets basic survival gear. You have sleeping bags, water bottles, and emergency food for 3 days. You cannot bring shelter materials or heating devices. You must build your own shelter, find additional food if needed, and stay warm. The trial lasts 72 hours. She pointed to a row of backpacks on the ground. "Each bag contains the same supplies. The test starts when I give the signal." Anyone who cannot continue may activate an emergency beacon for rescue. The alien teams grabbed their backpacks and moved away from the base camp. They spread out across the ice field to find good spots to set up camp. Most of them headed for areas that seemed flat and open. Tay-Ho picked up his backpack last. It was much lighter than what he usually carried on survival trips. He walked slowly across the ice, looking carefully at the ground and the sky. Damin followed him, recording everything with her camera. The aliens seem very confident, Damin said. Confidence is good, Tay-Ho replied, but understanding your environment is better. He stopped walking and knelt down in the snow. He picked up a handful and squeezed it, then let it fall through his fingers. He did this several times in different spots. What are you doing? Damin asked, testing the snow. Different types of snow have different properties. Some snow is good for building. Other snow is not. In the distance, the alien teams were already setting up their camps. The crystal beings were trying to build geometric structures using pieces of ice. The methane breathers were assembling some kind of technological device. The energy beings were creating a circle and trying to generate heat. Tay-Ho continued to study the area. He looked at the wind patterns by watching how the snow moved. He checked the direction of the sun and felt how the air moved across the ice. The wind comes from the north, he said to Mimin. It will get stronger tonight. The temperature will drop below -30 degrees. Captain Yila's voice echoed across the ice field through loudspeakers. The extremist trial begins now. You have 72 hours to survive. Good luck to all participants. The alien teams immediately began working on their shelters. They moved quickly and seemed to know exactly what they wanted to do. Machines beeped and hummed as they assembled their camps. Tay-Ho sat down on his backpack and continued to watch the snow and wind. He seemed to be in no hurry at all. Should you not start building? Damin asked. The other teams are already making progress. Tay-Ho smiled. The day is still young. I want to understand this place first. My grandfather always said that the land will teach you what you need to know if you listen carefully. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped quickly. The alien teams worked harder to finish their shelters. Strange lights and sounds came from their camps as they used their advanced technology. Tay-Ho finally stood up and began to walk around the area again. This time he was looking for something specific. He kicked at the snow in different places and nodded to himself. Now I begin, he said quietly. The first night of the extremist trial was about to begin. 7 different species from across the galaxy would test their survival skills against the brutal cold of Earth's Arctic. The aliens had advanced technology and thousands of years of space travel experience. Tay-Ho had only his knowledge. His hands and the snow around him, the trial, would show which approach worked better. The temperature dropped fast as darkness came to the Arctic. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the cold bit into everything like hungry teeth. Ice began to form on the alien equipment that had worked perfectly just hours before. Park Sujin watched her weather instruments inside the warm base camp building. The numbers kept falling. Mace 28 degrees and dropping, she announced over the radio. Wind speed increasing to 40 kilometers per hour. Outside, the alien teams were discovering that the Arctic night was different from anything they had expected. Vextar and his crystal team had built tall, geometric structures using chunks of ice. The buildings looked beautiful, like glass sculptures sparkling under the stars. But the crystal beings were already in trouble. Our forms are becoming sluggish, Vextar reported to his team. The cold is making our crystal matrix less flexible. The problem was worse than just being uncomfortable. Crystal beings like the Zephyrians were used to absorbing and storing heat energy. In the hot deserts of their homeworld, this made them powerful and quick, but in the Arctic there was no heat to absorb. Instead, their bodies were losing energy to the cold air around them. Their beautiful ice structures made the problem worse. The geometric buildings they had built were actually pulling heat away from their bodies. The ice walls conducted the cold directly into their shelter. Within 2 hours of sunset, frost was forming on their crystal skin. Across the ice field, Blorth and the methane breathers were facing their own disaster. Their advanced atmospheric suits were designed to work in the vacuum of space and on gas. Giant moons. The engineers who built the suits had thought of everything except one problem: the tubes and valves that supplied methane gas to their helmets were freezing solid. System malfunction, Blorth's suit computer announced in a mechanical voice. Primary gas flow reduced by 60%. Secondary systems failing? The methane breathers had brought backup equipment, but it was having the same problems. The liquid methane in their tanks was turning into slush. The electronic controls were becoming slow and unresponsive. Warning lights flashed red inside their helmets. Emergency protocols activated, another team member reported. If the gas flow stops completely, we will have only 15 minutes of reserve air. The energy beings led by Kalith were experiencing something even stranger. Their bodies were made of controlled plasma held together by electromagnetic fields. On their homeworld, this made them nearly invincible. They could fly through space and survive in the hearts of stars, but the extreme cold was causing their plasma fields to contract and destabilize. Kalith's glowing form was becoming dimmer and smaller. The energy that made up his body was condensing. As it cooled, like steam turning into water. "I am losing cohesion," Kalith said, his voice growing weaker. The electromagnetic fields cannot maintain proper alignment in these temperatures. His team members were having the same problem. They huddled together, trying to share energy, but this only made all of them weaker. Their bright, powerful forms were fading like dying stars. Dr. Huang monitored all the teams from his medical station. Warning alarms kept going off as his computers detected dangerous changes in alien vital signs. Temperature readings, energy levels, and biological functions were all dropping into critical ranges. Team Zephyr is showing signs of severe hypothermic shock, he reported to Captain Yilla. The methane breathers are approaching respiratory, and the energy beings are losing molecular stability. Captain Yilla's compound eyes reflected the flashing warning lights on the monitoring equipment. She had overseen many trials on different worlds, but she had never seen so many teams in trouble so quickly. Meanwhile, Teho was still walking around his chosen area, studying the snow. He moved slowly and carefully, testing different patches with his hands and feet. Damin followed him, recording everything with her camera. "Are you not cold?" Damin asked. Her breath came out in thick white clouds. "Yes, I am cold," Teho replied. Calmly, but being cold and being in danger from cold are different things. Right now, I am learning what this place wants to teach me. He knelt down and dug into the snow with his hands. About 30 centimeters down, he found a layer that was different from the snow on top. This snow was harder and more compact. The wind had pressed it together over many days. "This is what I need," he said, standing up and brushing the snow. Off his gloves in the distance, bright lights suddenly flashed from the crystal being's camp. It was an emergency beacon. Vextar's voice came over the radio, though it sounded slow and distorted. "Request immediate evacuation," he said. Team members entering critical energy state. Cannot maintain body temperature. A rescue helicopter appeared quickly and landed near the crystal camp. Emergency medical personnel helped the Zephyrians into heated suits and carried them to the helicopter. Their beautiful ice structures stood empty, already starting to crack in the wind. "First elimination in 8 hours, Captain Yilla announced. Team Zephyr has been removed from the trial." The methane breathers were next. Blorth's suit finally failed completely, cutting off his gas supply. His team activated their emergency beacon before he could suffocate. The rescue team had to work quickly to get them into backup breathing apparatus and evacuate them to safety. Second elimination, came the announcement. Team Nethrin has withdrawn. Kalith and the energy beings lasted slightly longer, but their plasma forms continued to destabilize. By midnight, they were barely glowing. When one team member completely lost cohesion and nearly dissolved into the air, they called for rescue. As well, third elimination. Team Stellar has been evacuated. In less than 12 hours, 3 of the 7 teams had been forced to quit. The advanced technology and superior evolution that the aliens had bragged about were useless against the simple, brutal cold of the Arctic night. The remaining alien teams watched these evacuations with growing fear. Their own equipment was starting to show problems. Joints were freezing, batteries were dying, and even their advanced materials were becoming brittle in the extreme cold. Through it all, Tejo continued his slow, methodical work. He had found the right type of snow and was now cutting it into blocks using a small knife from his survival kit. Each block was the same size and shape. He worked steadily, not hurrying, making sure each cut was clean and precise. "Why are you cutting the snow into squares?" Damin asked. "You will see," Tejo said. "My grandfather taught me that the old ways work because they understand the nature of things. Advanced does not always mean better." The alien observers in the base camp were beginning to take notice of the humans' strange behavior. While their own teams struggled with failing technology, this primitive human was calmly cutting snow with a simple knife. "What is the human doing?" one alien scientist asked. "Unknown," replied another. "His actions appear inefficient and purposeless." But Dr. Huang, watching through his medical monitors, noticed something interesting. While all the alien team showed signs of hypothermia and stress, Tejo's vital signs were completely normal. His body temperature was stable, his heart rate was steady, and he showed no signs of cold-related distress. How is this possible? The alien observers wondered. As the first night of the trial continued, the temperature kept dropping. More alien equipment failed. Emergency beacons flashed in the darkness as another team called for rescue. Tejo kept cutting snow blocks, working by the light of a small headlamp. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The Arctic was teaching its lessons, and only one student seemed to be learning. The second day of the trial began with pale sunlight struggling through gray clouds. The temperature had reached -35 degrees during the night, and thick frost covered everything. Only 4 teams remained in the competition. Te-Ho had worked through most of the night, cutting the snow blocks by the light of his small headlamp. Now, as dawn broke, he had a pile of perfectly shaped blocks stacked neatly beside him. Each block was about the size of a briefcase and cut with smooth, precise edges. Min had dozed fitfully in her sleeping bag nearby, waking often to record Tejo's progress. She was amazed that he seemed to have unlimited energy despite the brutal cold. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, stamping her feet to get warm. "A little," Tejo replied. "But the snow was perfect for cutting during the night. When the temperature dropped, it became harder and more stable. I wanted to take advantage of that." He picked up one of the blocks and showed it to her. The snow was compressed and solid, almost like white concrete. When he tapped it with his knife, it made a ringing sound like a bell. "This is wind-packed snow," he explained. "The constant wind has pressed out most of the air bubbles and made it very dense. It is much stronger than regular snow." Damin looked confused. "But why do you need it to be strong?" "You're just building a shelter, not a house." Tejo smiled and set the block down carefully. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about his grandfather, who lived with the Inuit people in northern Canada. He learned their traditional ways of surviving in the Arctic." As he spoke, Tejo began to arrange the snow blocks in a circle. He placed each block precisely, making sure the edges fit together perfectly. The circle was about 3 meters across. "The Inuit have lived in places like this for thousands of years," Tejo continued. "They developed techniques that work with the environment, not against it. They understood that snow is not just frozen water. It can be a building material, insulation, and protection all at the same time." The remaining alien teams were watching from their own camps. Their advanced shelters were still standing, but just barely. The extreme cold had made their materials brittle and their electronics unreliable. They looked at Tejo's simple snow cutting with a mixture of confusion and scorn. Commander Roth, a military observer from one of the alien species, spoke into his communication device. "The human appears to be constructing some kind of primitive dwelling. Analysis suggests he is using compressed frozen precipitation as building material. His scientist colleague replied, inefficient. Our thermal generators and climate-controlled habitats are far superior to such crude methods. But their thermal generators were failing. The power cells that should have lasted for weeks were draining in hours. The extreme cold was affecting the chemical reactions inside the batteries, making them produce less energy. Their climate-controlled habitats were losing the battle against the Arctic wind. Dr. Lim Hai-won, a human physicist at the base camp, was explaining the situation to puzzled alien observers. Cold temperature affects all matter, she said, pointing to charts and graphs. It makes metals contract and become brittle. It slows down chemical reactions. It changes the properties of materials in ways that many species do not expect. The aliens listened, but they still did not understand why their superior technology was failing while a primitive human seemed comfortable working in the same conditions. Taeho continued building his circular wall of snow blocks. As the wall grew higher, he began to angle each new row of blocks slightly inward. The circle was becoming a dome shape, curving up toward the sky. It looks like an igloo, Damin said, recognizing the traditional Inuit shelter. Yes, but with some modifications, Taeho replied. I am using engineering principles that my grandfather did not know about. The dome shape distributes weight evenly and can support more load than a simple curved roof. The angles are calculated to create the strongest possible structure. He pulled out a small notebook and showed Damin pages of calculations and sketches. He had been planning this shelter for hours, working out the mathematics of dome construction, thermal dynamics, and structural engineering. This is not just copying an old design, he explained. This is understanding why the old design worked, and making it even better. As the dome grew higher, Taeho began to cut special blocks with beveled edges. These fit together like puzzle pieces, creating a smooth, continuous surface. He worked slowly and carefully, checking each block multiple times before placing it. The alien observers were becoming more interested in his progress. Co. Ji-woo, a thermal engineer at the base camp, was monitoring the temperature inside Taeho's partially completed dome. Interesting, she said, checking her instruments. The internal temperature is already 3 degrees warmer than the outside air, and he has not even finished the roof yet. Dr. Lim nodded. Snow is an excellent insulator when it is properly used. Each snowflake contains tiny air pockets that trap heat. When you compress the snow into blocks, you create a material that is both strong and insulating. One of the alien scientists looked skeptical. But surely our advanced thermal regulation systems are more effective than frozen water? Let us see, Dr. Lim replied, watching her instruments carefully. As Taeho continued working, he began to explain his process to Damin. The key is understanding how heat moves, he said, placing another block carefully in position. Heat always flows from warm places to cold places. The goal is to slow down that flow as much as possible. He pointed to the gaps between the blocks. I am fitting these blocks very tightly together to prevent air leaks. Moving air carries heat away much faster than still air. By stopping air movement, I can keep warm air inside and cold air outside. The dome was now almost complete. Only a small hole remained at the top. Taeho selected a specially cut block that was shaped like a keystone. This piece would lock all the other blocks together and complete the structure. This is the most important block, he said, lifting it carefully. If I cut it wrong or place it badly, the whole dome could collapse. He climbed on top of the dome and lowered the keystone into place. It fit perfectly, and the entire structure suddenly seemed to lock together and become solid. The dome looked like a perfect hemisphere made of white, crystalline blocks. Now for the finishing touches, Taeho said. Climbing down, he took handfuls of loose snow and began to pack it into any small gaps between the blocks. Then he poured water from his water bottle over the entire surface. The water froze immediately, creating a smooth, hard shell over the snow blocks. This ice coating will make the dome waterproof and even stronger, he explained. It also makes the surface smooth so wind will flow over it instead of creating turbulence. The alien teams had stopped working on their own shelters to watch Teiho's construction. Their advanced technology was still failing, but this primitive human had built something that looked solid and purposeful. Commander, Roth spoke into his communicator again. The human has completed his structure. It appears to be functional. Inside the base camp, the monitoring equipment was showing something remarkable. The temperature inside Teiho's dome was rising steadily, even though no artificial heat source was being used. How is this possible? The alien observers asked. Dr. Lim smiled. He has not just built a shelter. He has created a thermal system that uses the laws of physics to his advantage. Traditional knowledge combined with modern understanding. That is often the most powerful combination of all. As the second day progressed, Taiho made final adjustments to his dome. He cut a small entrance tunnel that angled upward into the main chamber. He explained that this would trap warm air inside while allowing cold air to drain out. The remaining alien teams watched nervously as their own equipment continued to fail. Their confidence was fading as quickly as the heat from their malfunctioning thermal generators. Teiho's dome stood solid and complete, looking like it belonged in the Arctic landscape. Soon it would be time to test whether his traditional methods could really outperform alien technology. The trial was about to enter its most critical phase. Teiho crawled through the entrance tunnel of his completed snow dome for the first time. The tunnel was narrow and angled upward, forcing him to move slowly on his hands and knees. This was exactly what he wanted. Inside the dome, he could immediately feel the difference. The brutal Arctic wind that had been cutting through his clothes outside was completely gone. The air was still and quiet. He pulled out a small thermometer and watched the numbers climb. -5 degrees inside, he said to Minin, who was recording everything from outside. That is 30 degrees warmer than the outside air, and I have not even started heating it yet. Damin looked amazed. How is that possible? You have not used any fuel or electricity. Teiho sat cross-legged in the center of the dome and began to explain. The dome traps air, and trapped air is a very good insulator. But more importantly, my body heat has nowhere to escape. In the open air, wind carries my body heat away. In here, the heat stays with me. He lit a small candle from his survival kit and placed it on a block of snow that he had shaped into a shelf. The tiny flame seemed almost insignificant in the cold space, but within minutes, the thermometer began to rise again. Watch this, Teiho said, pointing to the dome walls. A thin layer of ice was forming on the inside surface of the snow blocks. The heat from the candle and his body was melting the innermost layer of snow, which then refroze into a smooth, shiny coating. This ice shell makes the dome even stronger and more airtight, he explained. It also reflects heat back into the space instead of letting it soak into the snow. The Inuit discovered this thousands of years ago. They called it igloo ice. Outside, the remaining alien teams were watching their equipment fail one by one. The temperature had dropped to -40 degrees, and the wind was getting stronger. Emergency warnings flashed on their control panels as power systems and life support began to shut down. Commander Roth's thermal generator had been running continuously for 36 hours, trying to heat his shelter. Now the fuel cells were nearly empty, and the heater was producing less and less warmth. Power reserves at 15%, his suit computer announced. Thermal output degraded. Recommend immediate conservation measures. His teammate, a reptilian being named Skix, was in even worse condition. Cold-blooded species like his were never meant to survive in freezing environments. Even with heated suits and thermal blankets, his body temperature was dropping dangerously. Low, cannot ... maintain. Core heat, Skix said through chattering teeth. Systems ... died. Dr. Wang watched the medical monitors with growing concern. Team Roth is approaching critical hypothermia levels, he reported. Team Yila's insectoid physiology is shutting down non-essential functions. I am reading. Dangerous drops in metabolic activity. Captain Yila's 6 arms moved sluggishly as she tried to repair her failing equipment. Insect-like beings were efficient in many environments, but extreme cold made their movements slow and clumsy. Her compound eyes were clouding over with frost. "Mechanical systems? Unresponsive?" she said slowly. "Joints ... stiffening ... to not ... continue ... Meanwhile, inside his snow dome, Taeho was comfortably warm. The thermometer now showed plus 10 degrees Celsius. The single candle and his body heat had transformed the space into a livable environment. Sao Gowo. The thermal engineer at base camp was studying the readings from sensors placed around Taeho's dome. "This is remarkable," she said to the gathered alien scientists. "He has created a thermal gradient that actually improves with time." She pointed to her computer screen, which showed temperature measurements from different parts of the dome. "The floor is the coldest part, around 0 degrees. The sleeping area is plus 10 degrees, and the air near the roof is plus 15 degrees. Hot air rises naturally, so he is using convection to create different temperature zones." Dr. Lim nodded approvingly. "Classical thermodynamics. Hot air is less dense than cold air, so it floats upward. Cold air is heavier, so it sinks down and flows out through the entrance tunnel. This creates a circulation system that constantly removes the coldest air." The alien observers looked confused. "But this contradicts our understanding," one scientist said. "How can a primitive shelter outperform our advanced climate control systems?" "Because your systems fight against the environment," Dr. Lim explained. "They use energy to force heat into a space and keep cold out. His system works with natural processes. It uses the environment's own physics to create comfort." Inside the dome, Taeho was demonstrating this principle to Da Min, who had crawled inside to film. "Feel the airflow," he said, holding up a small piece of tissue paper. The tissue moved gently in a circular pattern. Cool air was flowing in through the entrance tunnel, warming up as it circulated around the dome, then rising to the top where it stayed warm. "The entrance tunnel is below the level of the main floor," Taeho explained. "Cold air is heavy, so it flows down and out. Warm air is light, so it stays up here where we sleep. This system runs itself using only the laws of physics." He added, "A second candle, and the temperature rose to plus 15 degrees. In a few hours, this will reach 20 degrees or more. Comfortable room temperature, using almost no fuel." Outside, another emergency beacon flashed. Commander Roth's team could not continue. The cold had defeated their advanced thermal suits and power systems. They activated their rescue signal and waited for evacuation. "Fourth elimination," Captain Yula announced weakly over the radio. "Team Roth ... withdrawn ... Only 3 teams remain now: Captain Yila's insectoids, 1 other alien species with cold weather gear, and Taeho. But Captain Yila's team was clearly in trouble. Their movements were becoming slower and more erratic as the cold affected their insect physiology. Dr. Wang's voice crackled over the radio. "Team Yila, your vital signs are entering dangerous territory. Core temperature dropping, metabolic activity severely reduced. I strongly recommend calling for evacuation." "Negative," Captain Yella replied stubbornly. "Must ... complete ... trial ... demands." But even as she spoke, frost was forming on her compound eyes. Her 6 arms could barely move to operate her equipment. The advanced heating systems in her shelter were failing just like all the others. Inside his warm dome, Taeho prepared a simple meal using his emergency rations. The space was now so comfortable that he had removed his heavy outer coat. He heated water over the candle flame and made hot tea. "Would you like some?" he offered to Damin, who was shivering despite her heavy clothing. She accepted gratefully. The hot liquid felt wonderful in the warm, still air of the dome. "This is incredible," she said. "It feels like we are in a heated building, not a snow shelter in the Arctic." "My grandfather would be proud," Taeho said quietly. "He always said that understanding nature is better than fighting it. Work with the environment, not against it." He explained more of the science behind his shelter. Snow is mostly air trapped between ice crystals. Air is one of the best insulators that exists. By building with snow blocks, I am essentially building. With insulation, the structure insulates itself. The third day of the trial was beginning, and the weather was getting even worse. The wind had increased to 60 kilometers per hour, and the temperature was dropping toward minus 45 degrees. A severe Arctic storm was approaching. Inside the base camp, meteorologist Park Soo-jin watched the weather radar with concern. "We have a major blizzard coming in," she announced. "Wind speeds will reach 80 kilometers per hour. Temperature could drop to minus 50 degrees. This will be the ultimate test." The remaining alien teams received this news with despair. Their equipment was already failing in the current conditions. A major storm would certainly finish them off, but inside his snow dome, Taeho simply added a third candle and checked his supply of fuel. The storm would actually help his shelter by piling more snow around the outside, adding extra insulation. "Let it come," he said calmly. "The dome is ready." The science of survival was about to face its greatest test. The approaching storm brought more than just cold and wind. It brought a moment that would change everything about the trial. As the weather grew worse, Taeho heard something that made him stop preparing for the blizzard. It was the sound of someone crying. Through the howling wind, he could hear alien voices calling for help. Not the organized emergency calls they had been making when requesting evacuation. These were the desperate sounds of beings in real trouble. Taeho crawled out of his warm dome into the brutal cold. The wind hit him like a physical blow, and the temperature was now minus 42 degrees. Through the blowing snow, he could see lights flashing frantically from the remaining alien camps. Captain Yula's voice came over the radio, weak and distorted. "Emergency systems evacuation beacon Damin emerged from the dome behind Taeho, camera in hand. "What is happening?" "Their shelters are failing," Taeho said, studying the distant lights. "The storm is too much for their damaged equipment. But they are too far from the base camp for rescue teams to reach them safely in this weather." On So-young's voice crackled. Over the radio from base camp, "All teams, this is command. The storm is too severe for helicopter evacuation. Rescue operations are suspended until weather conditions improve. Estimated time, 6 to 8 hours. This news sent panic through the remaining alien teams. 6 to 8 hours was far longer than their failing equipment could keep them alive. Without rescue, they would freeze to death before the storm passed. In the distance, Taeho could see a small figure stumbling through the snow, moving away from one of the alien camps. It was Nix, a young apprentice from the last remaining team, besides Captain Yila's. The alien was barely larger than a human child, and clearly lost in the blowing snow. "Someone is out there?" Taeho said, pointing into the storm. Dan Min looked where he was pointing, but could barely see anything through the snow. "Are you sure?" Taeho was already putting on his heavy coat and boots. "Yes, and they will die if we do not help them." "But this is a competition," Damin said. "You are supposed to be proving that humans can survive better than aliens. If you help them, you might lose." Taeho paused and looked at her seriously. "Winning a competition means nothing if other beings die because I did nothing to help them." He took a coil of rope from his survival gear and tied one end around his waist. The other end he tied to a snow block near his dome. "This will help me find my way back in the storm." Moving carefully against the wind, Taeho made his way toward where he had seen the small figure. The rope paid out behind him as he walked. Leaving a trail he could follow back to safety, he found Nix collapsed in the snow about 50 meters from the dome. The young alien was conscious but barely moving. Frost covered the clear faceplate of their environmental suit, and ice was forming around the joints. "Can you hear me?" Taeho shouted over the wind. Nix looked up weakly. "Equipment. Failing. Cannot. To shelter. Taeho helped the alien to their feet and began leading them back along the rope toward his dome. The wind was so strong that both of them had to lean forward just to keep moving. Snow stung their faces like tiny needles. When they reached the dome, Tejo helped Nix crawl through the entrance tunnel. Inside the warm space, the alien's environmental suit began to thaw out. Steam rose from the ice-covered equipment as it warmed up. How is this possible? Nix asked, looking around the dome in amazement. It is warm in here. Warmer than our heated shelters. Tejo gave the alien a cup of hot tea and began to explain how the dome worked. As he talked, Nix's communication equipment started working again as it warmed up. Other alien voices began to come through the radio. Captain Yula's team was still alive, but their shelter was collapsing under the weight of the storm. The final team was reporting complete power failure and dropping internal temperatures. We cannot last much longer, Captain Yula said over the radio. All equipment Tejo made a decision that surprised everyone listening. This is Kim Tejo. I am sending you instructions on how to build emergency shelters like mine. You can survive the storm if you follow these directions exactly. There was silence on the radio for a moment. Then Captain Yula's voice came back, confused. You would help your competitors? I would help anyone who needs it, Tejo replied simply. So Young's voice came from base camp. Tejo, are you sure about this? You could win the trial by letting the other teams fail? That would not be winning, Tejo said. That would just be waiting for others to lose. There is a difference. He began broadcasting detailed instructions over the radio. First, you need to find the right type of snow. Look for areas where the wind has been blowing for a long time. The snow will be hard and compact. Some of the alien teams were too proud to listen at first. They had spent the entire trial claiming that humans were primitive and inferior. Now they were being offered help by the very being they had dismissed, but as their equipment continued to fail and the storm grew worse, pride became less important than survival. One by one, the alien teams began to follow Tejo's instructions. Cut the blocks in a spiral pattern, he continued. Each block should be slightly smaller than the one below it. This creates the dome shape automatically. Through the radio, he could hear the aliens struggling with the unfamiliar techniques. They were used to assembling prefabricated components and operating complex machinery. Cutting snow blocks with simple tools was completely outside their experience. I cannot make the blocks the right shape, one alien reported. They keep cracking when I try to cut them. Use smooth, steady pressure, Tejo advised. Do not try to cut too fast. The snow will tell you how it wants to be cut if you listen to it. Nix, who was now warm and comfortable inside Tejo's dome, began to help translate the instructions for teams that were having trouble understanding human concepts. He means you must feel the resistance of the snow, Nix explained to Captain Yula's team. Each type of snow cuts differently. Hard snow needs gentle pressure. Soft snow needs quick, clean cuts. Through the long night of the storm, Tejo coached the alien teams through their emergency shelter construction. Some teams succeeded better than others. Captain Yila's insectoid physiology made it difficult for her to work in the extreme cold, but her team members took turns warming up inside their partially built shelter before going back out to continue construction. The final alien team had the most success. They were from a cold-weather planet and understood the challenges of working in freezing conditions. With Tejo's guidance, they managed to build a dome that was almost as good as his. Internal temperature rising, they reported happily, +5 degrees and climbing. By morning, all the surviving teams had managed to build emergency snow shelters that kept them alive through the storm. They were crude compared to Tejo's expertly constructed dome, but they worked well enough to prevent freezing. When the storm finally passed and rescue teams could reach the area, they found something unprecedented in the history of the extremists: trials. Instead of scattered alien teams fighting for individual survival, they found a community of beings who had worked together to overcome impossible conditions. Min had recorded everything, creating a documentary that would later be studied by survival experts across the galaxy. The footage showed not just the technical aspects of shelter construction, but the moment when competition transformed into cooperation. "Why did you help them?" she asked Teho as they sat in his warm dome, waiting for the rescue teams. Teho thought for a moment before answering. "My grandfather used to say that the strongest person is not the one who can survive alone. The strongest person is the one who can help others survive too." Outside, alien voices could be heard talking excitedly as they examined each other's emergency shelters and shared their experiences from the storm. The trial had become something completely different from what anyone had expected. It had become a lesson in the true meaning of strength. Dawn broke over a transformed landscape. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world of pristine white snow and clear, bitter air, but more than the weather had changed during the night. The entire nature of the extremist trial had shifted from competition to something entirely unexpected. Captain Yola emerged from her makeshift snow dome, moving slowly but steadily. The insectoid being who had been near death just 12 hours earlier was now alert and active. Her compound eyes gleamed as she looked at the rough but functional shelter her team had built. "Incredible," she said, running one of her 6 hands along the snow blocks. "This primitive material has saved our lives." Nearby, the team that Nix belonged to was making improvements to their shelter. They had learned quickly during the storm and were now adding features that Teho had mentioned in his radio instructions. Their dome was becoming more sophisticated with each modification. "Look at this," called Zeb, one of Nix's teammates. He pointed to a small alcove they had carved into the wall. "We can store equipment here, and it stays dry because warm air does not flow into this space." Teho crawled out of his dome and surveyed the scene. Where once there had been scattered alien camps struggling in isolation, there was now a small village of snow shelters. The aliens were moving between the domes, sharing techniques and comparing their construction methods. Bae Dong-wook, the cultural anthropologist at base camp, was documenting this unprecedented cooperation. "In over 50 years of extremist trials," he reported, "we have never seen competing species working together like this. The standard pattern is increasing hostility and resource hoarding as conditions become more difficult." But that was not what was happening here. Instead of becoming more competitive, the alien teams were becoming more collaborative. They had discovered that sharing knowledge made everyone stronger. "Your entrance tunnel design is more efficient than ours," Captain Yila said to Nix's team. "It creates better air circulation. Could you show us how to modify our dome?" General Vex, an alien military observer, watched this cooperation with confusion and growing respect. His species had always believed that strength came from superior technology and individual capability. The idea that primitive techniques and cooperative behavior could be more effective challenged everything he thought he knew about survival. "How is this possible?" he asked his aide. "These beings have abandoned their competitive advantages to help weaker competitors. This should result in failure for the stronger teams." His aide, a tactical analyst, was equally puzzled. "Unknown, General. All strategic models predict that resource sharing in extreme conditions leads to universal failure. Yet all teams are not only surviving but improving their situations." Meanwhile, Teho was moving between the different alien shelters, offering advice and helping with modifications. He showed Captain Eula's team how to cut ventilation holes that would prevent carbon dioxide buildup. He taught Nix's team how to create sleeping platforms that would be warmer than the floor. "The key is understanding that heat rises," he explained as he helped them reshape the interior of their dome. "If you sleep on the floor, you will be in the coldest part of the shelter. But if you build a platform even just 30 centimeters higher, you will be much warmer." The aliens worked eagerly to implement these improvements. They had quickly learned that human techniques, which they had initially dismissed as primitive, were actually highly sophisticated solutions developed. Over thousands of years of Arctic survival, Da-Min followed Teho as he moved from shelter to shelter, recording everything. The cooperation she was documenting was creating something none of them had expected: a learning community in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. "This is fascinating," she said as she filmed aliens helping each other cut snow blocks. They are not just copying your techniques, they are adapting them and improving them. She was right. Each alien team was modifying the basic dome design to suit their own physiology and needs. Captain Yila's insectoids had created a shelter with multiple chambers connected by tunnels, allowing different team members to control their own environment. Mix's team had built storage alcoves and work areas that took advantage of their species' small size. Most remarkably, they were sharing these innovations with each other. "Look at what we discovered," Zeeb called to Captain Yila's team. "If you make the entrance tunnel curve instead of going straight, it blocks wind even better." Captain Yila's team tried this modification and found that it worked perfectly for their shelter as well. They, in turn, shared their technique for creating internal partitions that allowed privacy while maintaining air circulation. Dr. Huang, monitoring everyone's health from base camp, was amazed by what his instruments were showing. "All remaining teams are showing stable vital signs," he reported. "Core temperatures normal, stress indicators minimal. This is unprecedented for day 3 of an Arctic trial. Usually by the 3rd day of an extremist trial, surviving participants were exhausted, stressed, and barely hanging on. But these teams were actually getting stronger. Their cooperation was creating a situation where the whole group was more capable than any individual team could have been alone." Taeho gathered everyone together outside the cluster of domes for a group meeting. The aliens stood in a circle, their breath creating clouds of steam in the cold air, but none of them seemed uncomfortable anymore. "You have all learned the basic techniques," he said. "But there is something more important than just building. Shelters, you have learned to work together. In the Arctic, cooperation is not just helpful, it is essential for survival." He pointed to the landscape around them. "This environment is too harsh for any individual to master alone. Even the Inuit, who lived here for thousands of years, survived by sharing knowledge and helping each other. The strongest communities were the ones where everyone contributed and everyone learned." Captain Yila nodded slowly. "On our homeworld, we compete for resources because they are limited. But here, knowledge is the most important resource. And knowledge becomes more valuable when it is shared, not less." Nick spoke up excitedly. "Yes. When you taught us to build these shelters, you did not lose your own ability to build them. Instead, all of us became capable of building them." General Vex, listening to these reports from base camp, was beginning to understand something that would change his entire military philosophy. Strength was not always about having better weapons or superior individual capability. Sometimes, strength came from the ability to create cooperation and share knowledge. As the day progressed, the alien teams continued to improve their shelters and help each other. They built connecting tunnels between domes, created shared work areas, and established a system for rotating duties like gathering snow and maintaining the shelters. What had started as 7 competing teams had become a single, integrated community. They were not just surviving the Arctic. They were beginning to thrive in it. The transformation was so complete that when Commander Roth's voice came over the radio from base camp, it took a moment for everyone to remember that this was supposed to be a competition. "Day 3 status report," Commander Roth said. "All remaining teams, please report your current conditions and resources." The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. "How do you report on a competition when everyone is working together?" Captain Yila answered for all of them. "All teams stable and secure, shelters functional and improving. No teams requesting evacuation." There was a pause from base camp. "Understood. Continue trial protocols?" But everyone knew that the trial had already become something much more important than a competition. It had become a demonstration of what was possible when different species worked together instead of against each other. As evening approached, and the temperature began to drop again, the aliens prepared for their second night in the snow domes. But this time they were not afraid. They had learned not just how to survive in the Arctic, but how to thrive there through cooperation and shared knowledge. The real trial was just beginning. The weather station alarms began screaming at 3 in the morning on the final day of the trial. Park Soo-jin jolted awake in the base camp and rushed to her instruments. What she saw made her blood freeze colder than the Arctic air outside. "Emergency weather alert," she broadcast immediately. "Massive storm system approaching. This is not a normal Arctic blizzard. Wind speeds will exceed 100 kilometers per hour. Temperature dropping to -55 degrees Celsius. All teams take immediate shelter and prepare for extreme conditions." Ko Jae-min, the emergency response coordinator, was already suiting up for potential rescue operations. But even as he prepared, he knew that no helicopter or ground vehicle could operate in the storm that was coming. The alien teams in Taeho would have to survive this completely on their own. Estimated duration of storm, 18 to 24 hours, Park Soo-jin continued. This represents the most severe Arctic conditions recorded in this region in over 30 years. The storm that was approaching was the kind that occurred only once in a decade. It was born from a collision of air masses that created a meteorological monster capable of killing anyone caught unprepared. In the shelters, the aliens woke to the sound of wind that was already beginning to howl across the ice. But instead of panic, they felt something that surprised them. Confidence. Captain Yulla emerged from her dome and looked at the darkening sky. "Storm approaching," she announced to the other teams. "Time to test what we have learned." The aliens had spent the previous day not just maintaining their shelters, but improving them. They had added extra layers of snow blocks, reinforced weak points, and created backup plans. Most importantly, they had learned to think like Arctic survivors. Taeho crawled out of his dome and immediately began assessing the situation. He looked at the wind direction, felt the air pressure, and watched how the snow was moving across the ground. "This will be the real test," he said to Min, who was preparing to document what might be the final hours of the trial. "Everything we have done up to now has been preparation for this moment." The wind speed increased rapidly from 40 kilometers per hour to 60, then 80. The temperature plummeted as the storm system moved overhead. This was not just weather. It was nature at its most violent and unforgiving. The first challenge came within an hour. The wind was so strong that it began to erode the snow domes, carving away at their surfaces like a giant sandblaster. The alien teams watched in horror as their carefully constructed shelters began to shrink. "External structure degrading," reported Zeb from Nix's team. "Wind is removing snow faster than we can replace it." But Taeho had anticipated this problem. "Add loose snow to the windward side," he instructed over the radio. "Do not try to stop the erosion. Instead, give the wind more material to work with. Let it carve the dome into its most aerodynamic shape." This advice seemed to go against logic. Instead of fighting the wind, Taeho was telling them to feed it. But the aliens had learned to trust human knowledge about Arctic survival. They began piling loose snow against the sides of their domes that faced the wind. The storm carved this extra snow away, but in doing so, it shaped the shelters into forms that were more streamlined and wind-resistant. "It is working," Captain Yiller reported. "The dome is changing shape, but it is becoming more stable, not less." The second challenge was even more dangerous. The extreme wind was creating a phenomenon called ground blizzard, where snow was picked up from the surface and blown horizontally at tremendous speed. Visibility dropped to zero, and the flying snow was like being sandblasted. "Cannot see anything outside," Nix reported. "The connecting tunnels between domes are filling with snow." This threatened to cut off communication and cooperation between the teams. If they became isolated from each other, they would lose the advantage that cooperation had given them. Taeho had a solution for this too, but it required courage from all the teams. "We need to create wind walls," he said. "Build barriers that will create calm spaces behind them. The snow will pile up against the barriers, but it will protect the areas behind them." Working in shifts, the aliens ventured out into the howling storm to build walls of snow blocks perpendicular to the wind direction. It was dangerous work that had to be done quickly, but it created sheltered areas where they could move between domes safely. Elder Quan, the ancient alien counselor observing the trial, watched these developments with growing amazement. "They are not just surviving the storm," he said to his aide. "They are adapting to it in real time. This level of environmental responsiveness is remarkable. The third challenge tested not just their shelters but their cooperation. The storm was so severe that some of the domes began to develop structural problems. Captain Eula's shelter developed a crack in one wall that threatened to spread and cause a collapse. Emergency in Dome 3, she reported. Structural integrity compromised, requesting assistance. Without hesitation, members from the other teams suited up and ventured out into the storm to help. Working together in the howling wind and blinding snow, they managed to reinforce the damaged wall and prevent a collapse. Repair successful, Captain Eula reported. All teams working together saved our shelter. This pattern repeated throughout the storm. When Nyx's team had problems with ice blocking their ventilation system, the other teams helped clear it. When Zeeb's entrance tunnel began to fill with snow, everyone worked together to dig it out. The cooperation that had begun as a survival technique had become something deeper, a genuine community that looked out for all its members inside his dome. Teho monitored the radio communications and smiled. The aliens were not just following his instructions anymore. They were anticipating problems, developing their own solutions, and teaching each other new techniques. They are becoming true Arctic survivors, he said to Munin. They understand. Now that the environment is not an enemy to defeat, it is a system to work with. The storm reached its peak intensity just before dawn. Wind speeds exceeded 120 kilometers per hour, and the temperature dropped to -58 degrees. These were conditions that would kill most living beings within minutes of exposure, but inside their snow domes, the alien teams were not just surviving. They were comfortable. The shelters that had seemed primitive and crude just days before were now proving to be superior to any technology they had brought with them. Internal temperature holding steady at +18 degrees, Nyx reported. All team members in good condition. Dome structural integrity excellent, added Captain Eula. No problems to report? Even Teho's dome, which had been subjected to the longest exposure and the most severe conditions, was performing perfectly. The temperature inside remained a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius throughout the worst of the storm. Dr. Huang, monitoring everyone's vital signs from base camp, could hardly believe what he was seeing. All teams showing normal heart rates, normal body temperatures, and minimal stress indicators. In conditions that should be fatal, they are as comfortable as if they were sitting in their own homes. As the storm finally began to weaken, the alien teams emerged from their domes to assess the damage. What they found amazed them. The storm had not destroyed their shelters. Instead, it had sculpted them into more perfect forms. The wind had carved away unnecessary material and left behind domes that were smoother, stronger, and more aerodynamic than what they had built. The connecting tunnels had been reshaped, but were still functional. The wind walls had captured enough snow to create a small village surrounded by protective barriers. The storm improved our shelters, Zeeb said in wonder. It made them better than we could have made them ourselves. Teho nodded. The Arctic teaches you what works and what does not work. If you listen to its lessons and work with its forces, it will help you survive. If you fight against it, it will destroy you. The final test was over. The extremist trial had become something that no one had expected, a master class in cooperation, adaptation, and working with nature instead of against it. As the sun rose over the snow-covered landscape, it illuminated not just surviving alien teams, but transformed beings who had learned the deepest secrets of survival in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The trial was ending, but the real learning was just beginning. The rescue helicopters appeared on the horizon like mechanical angels, their rotors cutting through the clear Arctic air. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a landscape that sparkled like diamonds under the morning sun. But what the rescue teams found when they landed was nothing like what they had expected. Instead of scattered, desperate survivors waiting for evacuation, they discovered a thriving community of snow shelters. Aliens and humans were moving freely between domes, sharing meals, and discussing improvements to their construction techniques. The scene looked more like a winter camping expedition than the aftermath of a survival trial. Captain Yila stood outside her dome, all 6 arms moving gracefully as she demonstrated snow-cutting techniques to a group of younger aliens who had come with the rescue team. Her compound eyes were bright and alert, showing no signs of the hypothermic distress that should have been inevitable after 3 days in the Arctic. "Evacuation teams ready for pickup," announced the helicopter pilot over the radio. "Negative." "On evacuation," Captain Yila replied, surprising everyone. "Request permission to extend trial for educational purposes. All teams are stable and learning valuable survival skills." Song Yunbai, the galactic liaison who had flown in with the rescue team, looked around the camp in amazement. She had coordinated dozens of extremist trials, and they always ended the same way, with exhausted, traumatized survivors who could barely wait to leave the testing environment. This was completely different. "I do not understand," she said to Captain Yila. "Your reports indicated that most teams had equipment failures and were near elimination. How are you all in such good condition?" Captain Yila gestured toward Taeho, who was helping Nix's team disassemble one of their domes to study its construction. "The human taught us that technology is not the only form of advancement. Sometimes the most sophisticated solutions are also the simplest ones." Supreme Counselor Vorth, the highest-ranking alien official in the rescue party, approached Taeho directly. The ancient being moved slowly but with great dignity, and when he spoke, everyone stopped to listen. "Kim Taeho of Earth," the Supreme Counselor said formally. "The Galactic Council has monitored this trial with great interest. We have observed behaviors that do not match our predictions or our understanding of survival dynamics." Taeho bowed respectfully. "Honored Counselor, I hope our actions have not caused problems for the trial protocols." The Supreme Counselor's expression was unreadable. "On the contrary, your actions have revealed significant gaps in our knowledge. We came here expecting to evaluate primitive human survival capabilities. Instead, we have witnessed teaching methods and cooperative strategies that surpass our most advanced theoretical models." Damin, who had documented everything throughout the trial, stepped forward with her camera and recording equipment. "Honored Counselor, I have complete documentation of all survival techniques used during the trial. The footage clearly shows the scientific principles behind each method." Supreme Counselor Vorth examined the camera with interest. "This documentation will be valuable, but we are more interested in understanding the philosophy behind these techniques. How did humans develop such effective environmental adaptation strategies?" Taeho thought carefully before answering. "We did not fight our environment. We studied it, understood it, and learned to work with it. My grandfather taught me that nature is not an enemy to defeat. It is a teacher that will share its secrets, if you approach it with respect and patience." "But your technology is thousands of years behind ours," protested General X, who had also come with the rescue team. "How can primitive methods outperform advanced systems?" Nix, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up eagerly. "Because they are not primitive. They are sophisticated solutions that have been refined over thousands of years. Human snow dome construction uses advanced principles of thermodynamics, structural engineering, and atmospheric physics." Zeeb nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and the cooperation strategies are even more advanced. Humans understand that shared knowledge makes everyone stronger, not weaker. This is a concept that our competitive societies never developed." Captain Yila added, "We have learned more about survival in 3 days than in decades of individual training. The human approach of teaching rather than competing has created capabilities that none of us possessed alone." Supreme Counselor Vorth listened to these testimonials with growing fascination. "Show me these techniques," he commanded. What followed was an impromptu demonstration that would become legendary in galactic survival training. Taeho, assisted by the alien teams, showed the Supreme Counselor and the rescue party how to read snow conditions, cut blocks with proper angles, and construct a dome that could maintain comfortable temperatures using only body heat and simple candles. But more than the technical skills, They demonstrated the cooperative methods that had transformed the trial from a competition into a learning community. Watch how they help each other, Song Yunbai observed, recording everything. When one team has a problem, all teams work together to solve it. This multiplies the capabilities of every individual. Dr. Huang presented his medical data to the Supreme Counselor. All participants showed improved health indicators as the trial progressed, he reported. Stress levels decreased, immune function improved, and psychological well-being increased. This is the opposite of what we normally see in survival situations. The Supreme Counselor studied the data carefully. Remarkable. Your species has developed survival strategies that actually improve performance under stress rather than degrading it. As the day progressed, more alien officials arrived to observe the demonstration. Word had spread through the galactic communication networks that something unprecedented was happening at the Earth trial. Elder Quan, who had been observing from base camp, finally spoke publicly about what he had witnessed. In my 400 years of life, I have seen many demonstrations of strength and capability, but I have never seen anything like this. These humans have shown us that true strength comes not from superior technology or individual prowess, but from the ability to teach, learn, and cooperate. The alien teams began sharing their own insights about what they had learned. Captain Yila explained how her insectoid physiology had actually been an advantage once. She learned to work with the cold instead of fighting it. Nix described how traditional human techniques could be adapted for different alien anatomies and environmental needs. Most remarkably, they began making plans for the future. We want to establish a training center here, Zeb announced. A place where beings from different worlds can learn Arctic survival techniques and cooperative strategies. Our homeworld experiences extreme cold seasons, added Captain Yilla. We want to invite human instructors to teach our people these methods. Supreme Counselor Vorth raised his hand for silence. The Galactic Council will need to deliberate on these proposals. But first, we must address the original purpose of this trial. He turned to face all the participants. The extremist trial was designed to determine which species deserves protected status and resource allocation based on survival capability. The results of this trial are ... unprecedented. The Supreme Counselor paused dramatically. Kim Tae-ho. Of Earth, your species has demonstrated not just superior survival skills, but something far more valuable, the ability to elevate other species to your level of capability through teaching and cooperation. He gestured toward the alien teams. These beings arrived here as competitors with advanced technology. They are leaving as students who have mastered techniques that their own civilizations could not develop despite thousands of years of advancement. The formal announcement came later that day, broadcast across the galaxy. By unanimous decision of the Galactic Council, the human species of Earth is awarded the highest protection status. Furthermore, Earth is designated as the primary training center for survival techniques and cooperative strategies for all member species. But for Tae-ho, the greatest reward came in the days that followed, as he worked with the alien teams to establish the first galactic survival training center. Young beings from dozens of worlds arrived to learn not just how to build snow domes, but how to approach challenges with patience, respect for the environment, and commitment to helping others succeed. What have we really accomplished here? Damin asked as they watched a group of alien students practicing snow-cutting techniques. Tae-ho smiled as he watched a crystalline being teaching a methane breather how to test snow density. We have shown that the strongest communities are not the ones where everyone competes to be the best. They are the ones where everyone works together to help everyone become better. The lesson of the Arctic had spread across the galaxy. True. Strength comes not from defeating others, but from lifting them up top, and in the frozen landscape of Earth's Arctic, that lesson was being taught to a new generation of beings who would carry it to the stars.